And
Yeah.
then at a higher level, again, in the us domain, which, when you go into critical thinking, you understand interdependence, you understand and you develop your systemic thinking also, a form of systemic intelligence. And then the actions, or the choices you make there, again, is a higher level. It's not just me and you. I'm into something much bigger, and it's the system around us, the world around us. And you could see, like, the Tibetan debaters at a high level would throw in debating any kind of problem and work and chew and then come up with, okay, so according to this, we should do that. Or so debating it's a high level thought process. It's a very high level thought process, and in the end, you can use it to achieve, this outcome of understanding the choices you make sure you make an ethical choice, a choice that is respectful for everybody, and or this isn't in a I mean, on a more practical level. If you go into a philosophical level, understanding emptiness, again, you're bringing this to a higher level again. So
Yeah.
that was what I was thinking. This is great fun, because I've never really thought about debating like this, but now it's helping me, understanding also why, developing critical thinking, and I could use the debating tool even more with some students or some teachers, to help them develop this thought process, actually. First time I learned debating, I felt like somebody had taken my brain, shaken it around, and put it back in a different position. And I was really
Yeah.
impressed. I thought, oh, actually, I had the shock of knowing, thinking there's a process behind it. It's not just happening left and right. You can train this thing. And it's absolutely awesome, because it helps you really see different angles. So for me, it was a brilliant experience that I kept for the rest of my life after. Never take anything for granted. Also, when you engage in a difficult conversation with others, maybe we can debate, just, disconnect the emotions for a while, and let's see the project for what it is. Not the project, but the problem. Let's put the problem on the table. Let's analyze. Let's debate. Let's see what happens. So it's really wonderful, and we don't have a lot of that in Western education, to be honest. It's funny, because educators will say, develop critical thinking, but they don't really know how to do it. They don't really do it. And there's a trend right now in school, because I see all these trends happening, some great, some less great, but about philosophical discussions, they call them. So this is fun. You ask your class to sit in a circle and discuss about some philosophical thing or problem. Or with young kids, we could say something like, what is friendship? And then, discuss about what we think friendship is or is not. But yet there's no paying attention to the process of this.
Yeah.
So this is why debating is so wonderful. It
Mm.
really trains you in a process. And then, I don't know, I think we should really see how we can bring this into Western education more. That would
Yeah.
be very useful. Well, as I said, I mean, the whole thing I've been talking about before, connecting this thought process, okay? There's a way of thinking about things that can be helpful. And, we leave for a while the emotions on the side, and we go through a real rigorous thought process, based on our values, but to achieve some sustainable outcome. Whether you're a scientist in the environment, if you're in neuroscience, if you're an economist, if you're a teacher, if you're in charge of any kind of company, this thought process can be it can be connected to our values too. And so if I appreciate my interdependence and I go into responsible decision making, now I'm bringing this back to social emotional learning, the debating part, because a responsible decision, this is fun, responsible decision making, when I saw that, I'm like, what the hell, what is this competency about? But actually, it's a process. Making a choice is a process. So,
Mm.
and that's not explained to teachers often, and we just go, help your kids make responsible decision. There's a whole huge process behind that. So the debating process is it's similar, and it leads to the same place. Now, if we understand that when we engage in this thought process, we want to make, we want to have a responsible outcome. We want to make responsible choices. So we could apply the debating process to highly complex situation
Mhm.
in our lives. Environment crisis,
Mhm.
it's huge, and there are many, many components. It's highly complex. So how can debating, if I'm trained in a more rigorous ways, and I'm not just, oh my God, we have to stop this. It's crazy. I'm all emotional about the environment. I'm not going to achieve much decisions. But if we sit down and we have some form of thought process, and we go through the elements, and we know we want some responsible, sustainable outcome. Now, here, Buddhism is also really interesting. We could have some intention. And I've never asked, my husband, but, there must be some kind of intentionality behind debating at some point.
Mhm.
So if we set our intentions and we go through the process addressing complex problems, I think we can have way more sustainable issues.
Mhm.
In general, it's a great tool for developing skeptical inquiry. At a time when there's a great deal of exaggerated claims, economic, or both exaggerated and omnipresent economic claims, political claims, um, that are quite often taken for granted. And since one is put in a position, if you're debating, you're put in a position of having to make a response if you're the respondent. And if you're the attacker, you're put in the position of the omnipresent economic system, of the commercial advertiser, in a way, or of the politician. Well, one of the great advantages of following a debate is that since, as the respondent, you have to come up with an answer, um, you learn the many different sides of issues. And every debater that I've known, and I've had, well, I used to say I had 21 teachers, so by now I've had 23 or 24. They're all enamored of some non-Buddhist teacher, some Indians, non-Buddhist Indian school. They're enamored of that position, and they love debating that side. uh, you know, people like to say, oh, Gelugpas are just siding with Tsongkhapa. That's a ridiculous statement.
There's a
You know,
lot of creative room for freedom and creativity in your thinking.
yeah, within the debating courtyard, you have tremendous freedom.
Mm.
for me is you know the what the in the when you practice real practice dharma, you have to the one of the goals you have to control to your emotions. In order to control your emotions, you have to change attitude, and in order to change attitude, you have to have change to the perspective. So the debate is sometimes when you do, for example, impermanent, and likewise, it's a, what's the real source of some of the negative emotions. When you debate, basically you are studying about that, what is the emotion, how this come from, what's the consequence, all these things. When you learn these things and your perception, it's a change, and that affect to your attitude, and then that would ultimately affect to your emotion, which is better to control to your emotions. Maybe I would say maybe a little bit more. For example, normally we all think, we assume, we know, we are all of human is impermanent, we are going to die. But sometimes if we really don't much cultivating on that, we are going to, like, always we have a time, we can do some practice later or something like that. So if you really focus on the through a debate, or debate is basically using your reasons, and if your reason is sometimes more and more strong, and that's your mind is more and more kind of how to say, it's more and more to see the reality, which is more effective way to your attitude or your behavior. So that's why the uh, debate can very
So,
useful to apply to practice. The first one is, debate is sort of like we are taking to kind of so many things we are just taking granted.
Take for
Normally we
granted. Yeah.
just kind of taking very granted. So the debate is sometimes when two people debate, even though your statement is, it looks like established, well established, and we just take granted. But then sometimes we try to using analysis, and there's some weakness, and then
Mm,
also there's some sort of oh, we are just inside some sort of bubble. We
mm,
can pick out something like that. For example, and it used to be science, that everybody take granted the falling apple is on the ground is just taking granted, no one questions until Newton comes. So something like that. Also, debate is a very unique kind of how to say, its property or characteristic that we can get out a little bit from the normal perspectives. That's where sometimes it's a some sense you get lots of innovative thinking, which is some of them is real close to the nature of reality.
mm.
okay, yeah, that's, I spent many years debating. Uh, I enjoyed the debate, and we can talk about it later. I thought it was a valuable occupation in itself. Uh, but and so I did it for a number of years. And I'm basically an intellectual, and what I enjoyed in debate is the ability to inquire about matters in a disciplined way. And so this is what I found really exciting in debate. And this is what I did pursuing the various topics that I taught in the Tibetan Gelug Academy. Now, what I learned, as I emphasized in my book, I think I learned many things, but I think the most important uh, quality or point about debate for me was to develop a sense of critical inquiry, because when we are faced with ideas, we tend to take them for granted, and we don't see what's questionable in them. And that's a really short-sighted, and this is why people get into all kind of false idea, because they don't question this idea. And so what I learned in debate is to question, because every point of view is questionable, which doesn't mean that every point of view is equally true or false, not at all. But that if you are an intelligent person, you are going to be able to raise question about anything, any statement that you are presented. And so that's an extremely important skills. We can see nowadays people cruelly lacking this skill and being taken by all kind of ridiculously false ideas. And what I learned really is the art of questioning, the art of inquiry, not and not just in a kind of often my students are pretty good at criticizing and taking down ideas, which is in itself a very valuable skill, but it's not the only skill that is involved in the art of inquiry, because once you're able to see what's questionable, you also need to see what are the way to assert what you want to assert. And so you need to be able to marshal the the criticism of any kind of views and statement to lead to a more kind of more better grounded opinion. And that's what is extremely important about this training, is that it allows you to take things down, but don't stop with that. Use this taking down in order to refine your understanding, gain a better view, and also keep a very open mind, because one of the most important experience in debate is the realization that you can be shown to be wrong at any time during the debate. And so if you don't keep that in mind, you can be badly beaten in debate. And you realize that once you have this attitude, then things go a lot better. And I think so it's this mixture of openness, critical inquiry, while still marshaling resource to get to a more positive point. That's what I think I learned in debate. And that's a skill that basically takes years to develop, as any good intellectual training does.
So my personality, I became a nun, when I was 20, and then I can see what differences in my life. Before I was 20, I'm not seeking, that's more like related with precious human life. And also from beginning, when I was learning the debate, and it's sort of like not used in my life, but when I use day to day and year to year, then now I see the value of the debate, which effect or which influence on my way of thinking is the most important, is help to, whenever I hear something news from my friend or from the social media, then I never believe instant on this news. Instead of blaming and trusting, and it gave me energy or like potential to think why, and why it is, why that is. what's the reason. And then when I see a reason, then also I have like where I have other things like why this reason is right. How can I believe this reason is right or correct or not correct? So because of this influence, right? This influence, you can stand very like very confident. Most is the confident. So this is also related with the Buddha's teaching. Buddha himself taught us, don't believe to the person, right? Believe in their speech. And also don't believe in the word and look at meaning. And then also the meaning, also don't believe instead, is the meaning is also more is correct or not, right? The information or the meaning. So this pretty much related with this teaching of Buddha, advice of Buddha or teaching, right? So this, I think I can say this is the most effect. Instead of believing to someone, it will bring more question why and how and like sort of these things. So this I think the most effect. And so for the scientists, of course, right? The more scientists pretty much similar with the Buddhist philosopher is like to invest new things. And also when they find something, also they are not believing to this, like finding, and then also they have some like a scientific way of experimenting on it. And then finally when they found the result, and then the debate will help also deep invest on this result. How can we, for example, like how can we say this is a right, and how can we say this is the final result? So what is the reason? That then they will, I think they will brought more questions, and then let them more study about it. So I think this is a very pretty much similar with this like science method, so we can apply for be a scientist too.
But actually, my original intent or my thought about being a monk, I thought I would be meditating a lot. That's kind of the view that we often have of monks, is that they're very quiet and they sit alone and meditate, which is kind of what I thought what I would be doing. I was a little tired of study after about 17 years of study, graduating from college, and thought that it was time to really learn to calm my mind and not think so much about things all the time. But I've learned through this process of being here that meditation is a lot more than just about sitting peacefully. Ultimately, the goal of meditation is to have not just a peaceful mind, but also a very sharp mind, and a mind that's able to discern what's correct and incorrect, and especially in terms of suffering and happiness. What is the cause of suffering? What is the cause of happiness? So really what meditation is training of the mind. So training of the mind can take many forms. And sometimes that involves seated meditation, where we try to focus single-pointedly on a particular subject or a particular object for an extended period of time. And even also within that, sometimes seated meditation can mean thinking about something, but in a very focused way, not in so much of a discursive way that we often get very distracted, but really trying to focus on a particular question or something that we're contemplating. But training the mind can also take other forms, and this is what we do in debate. It's a process of training the mind that sharpens the mind, gives us better use of our mental faculties. which ultimately is going to certainly benefit us if we want to sit in quiet meditation as well, but also benefit us in everything we do, because our mind, of course, as the Buddha said, everything follows after the mind. If we want to discipline our body, we really have to discipline our mind. You can't be a good athlete if your mind is always distracted. You have to have a good mind to be able to control your body. And anything else we want to do. If we want to be successful in our work, if we want to be successful in study, or just in our personal relationships with other people, it all depends on our mind and how much focus we have, how much we're able to discern what's correct, if it's incorrect, be able to also just have less afflictive emotions, as we say. So less under the power of anger, attachment, emotion, greed, and emotions that cause trouble for us, destructive emotions. The more that our mind is able to overpower these through understanding, through concentration and understanding, then the better everything will go for us in life. So I think some of you might know, if you know anything about Buddhism, you might know that there's a very famous analogy the Buddha gave to one of his students. This student was very intellectual, or just kind of a little bit too much speculation. The student kept asking him all kinds of relevant questions, like when did the universe begin, and how and when will it end, or also about what happens when you die, things like this. Now, in Buddhism, these are actually, in some sense, important questions, and there's something we do to examine and debate. But there's a time for asking these, and there's a way to think about them. Whereas I think in this particular case, we see that this person was very much, we'd say, too much in his head. He wasn't focused on right now, here and now. What are the day-to-day actions am I doing that are affecting me and affecting others in a positive or negative way? So the Buddha said to this person, you're like a person who's been shot by an arrow, and the doctor comes to remove the arrow, and this person won't allow the doctor to remove the arrow until he can tell him who shot the arrow and who made the arrow. And was this person who made the arrow, was he from the Brahmin caste or from the warrior caste? All kinds of irrelevant questions. And then until the person gets the answers, he won't allow the doctor to remove the arrow. By the time he gets the answers, he's going to be dead. So the Buddha's point was that if we just speculate about things without dealing with the suffering that we're experiencing right now and what are its causes, then we'll miss the point. So then this would seem, in some sense, well, is this showing that all this debate that we do, is it just useless? Is it contrary to the Buddha's teaching, where the Buddha said not to speculate so much? And that's a big question. But I think we have to look more deeply at what the Buddha was intending. And the Buddha was very clear that correct understanding is the cause of liberation. So it's not that we just shut off our mind. Sometimes people think that that meditation just means that you stop all thoughts. That having all these thoughts is the cause of suffering, and we want to just have less thoughts and get to a point where we just are very calm and aren't thinking about things. But this is certainly not the Buddha's message. The Buddha is actually very clear that that's a mistake. The Buddha addressed this in the context of other teachers during his time who taught paths like these, where meditation is just about stopping thoughts. And the Buddha said that this is not the path to liberation. Liberation comes through understanding. So then the question is, what was his intent then in this analogy of the arrow? And again, as I alluded to, I think that we have to look at what are the kinds of questions we're asking. Are we asking the right questions and at the right time? And in debate, it's a very focused environment. It's not just about asking speculative questions that have no relation to our current state of affairs. We have to look at our mind and how is our mind functioning. And questions about that and debating about that is very relevant. And even questions about the age of the universe and questions about what happened when I die are very important. It's just a matter of asking them within the right context. And these are things that we do debate about. So I think for me, a lot of what I've gotten through debate is a more powerful mind, a clearer mind, more precision in my thinking, more ability to make coherent statements, be able to be coherent in terms of the earlier and later things I've said, be able to be very precise in terms of when I make statements and the words I use, being very clear. I want this particular word to mean this thing. Oftentimes we are very vague. The words we use, we're not really clear about exactly what we mean. And debate has really helped me with that. I think I can say absolutely, without a doubt, as 15 years since I've been in college, but my mind is much sharper now than it was when I was in college. As I get older, it just gets sharper. Now, hopefully, maybe someday that will decline if I have some kind of mental brain deterioration. I don't know. But so far, I just see it getting clearer and clearer every year. My memory also increases. So my ability to remember what happened, not just in terms of remembering texts, but ability to remember events in my life is much clearer now than it was before. And this comes through the training that we go through.
I mean, I think the essence of debate is questioning, is raising doubts so as to be able to explore a topic. So I think that's kind of the essence. We can say doubt or a critical mind is the essence of debate. So being able to see something from different points of view, not accepting it on face value, but asking why something is the case, demanding reason for why something is the case, being able to give good reasons for why something is the case. So in that way, gaining depth in regard to a problem or an issue through the process of questioning. So I think that is tremendously valuable. And if you were to ask me, what have you gotten out of debate? I would say it is that. It's the ability, or at least learning how to think critically, how not to accept things at face value, what constitutes good reasons and bad reasons, to think dialogically. That is, if I were to put something forward as a position, not necessarily in an oral debate, but even in writing, to anticipate how someone else might respond to that, and therefore try to frame my position in a way that anticipates someone else's possible objection. All of these things, I think, are facets of debate that are extremely useful. And I think it's one of the great gifts of Tibetan debate is to cultivate that attitude. I think, just as an aside, another gift of Tibetan debate is to create people with thick skins. In the debate courtyard, as you know, people oftentimes yell at each other, they scream at each other, they call each other names. And I think in the West, sometimes we have an overly thin skin when it comes to the exploration of philosophical, ethical, political issues, even, where people don't learn to fruitfully argue with each other because they take disagreements oftentimes personally.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the great results of Tibetan debate, that it creates people who learn how to argue well and to agree vehemently, without taking it personally, right? Without feeling hurt by the fact that someone else isn't disagreeing, is disagreeing with them. I think what really does make a difference is when you have somebody that is trained, like Tibetan Gelug monks and nuns now are trained in traditional debate. As a result of these training, I think, a form of training, these specialists have very clear minds. This is my experience, right? They can really clearly understand what a problem is, and they're able to frame an issue in very clear and concise terms. I think this is also a byproduct of debate, one of the great fruits of debate. So I think it's to say that scientists, that I doubt that scientists are going to, take up debate as a way of study, is not to say that it wouldn't be fruitful for scientists to engage in dialogue with monks and nuns who have been trained in this way. I think that would be very useful. But then what essentially happening in that is not necessarily that they're using as a way of communication, but that the whole tradition of debate is being embodied in the monk or the nun who has been trained in this way, and therefore they are, in a sense, embodying that tradition and are responding through the knowledge that they've gained through that tradition. I think that is tremendously valuable.
I would say that usually when we summarize or when we try to think of the practice and the study the practice in this Buddhist Nalanda tradition, this wonderful traditions, usually we summarize this in a very simple module, which is first the listening or hearing from your masters, which involves reading, memorizations, and those things. And second, contemplation, which is analyzing the meanings, trying to understand what it means, and ultimately meditating on it. Meditating here, in the sense, is practicing and implementing what you have learned into your day-to-day life. So these three processes actually combines the whole, what should I say, the structure of Tibetan Buddhist studies, not necessarily Tibetan Buddhist, but the Nalanda tradition in itself. So debate actually takes a very important part of this learning. So first, when you started to memorize and read, and when you go to your teachers and receive the teachings, so at that time you may not have that ability to judge what is right, whether your teachers say everything is right or wrong. In the medieval period, I mean, in this process, when you started to concentrate, when you started to contemplate about what you are learning, whether it is true, whether there can be any other way of saying. So here the debate really comes into a picture, and it plays a very important role. I will say that debate in general, when I first studied the debate at a monastery, it was really tough. And as I mentioned you before, I did schooling here at the monastery, Siraji Secondary School. We also have a modern school here at the monastery, and where we study the English, science, and maths according to the Government of India's syllabus. And also, morning and evening, we do memorizations of our Buddhist texts. And when we are in the 7th standard, so debate is very, what should I say, gently introduced for the young kids. I mean, not really kids, for the young monks, so that when we finish our school and when we join the university, we have at least a broad idea about what debate is all about. So it doesn't like completely new subject. So the first day when our teacher taught us about debate, it really, I mean, it was really something very special, something, what should I say, it's not really difficult, but something entirely out of things that you have been learning for so many years in your school. So that's my experience with debate on the first day of taking the debate class. So what I will say that, especially in your thinking, it helps you to merely not by hearing or reading something, it gives you an extra power or extra strength to contemplate on its nature, whether the things that has been written or said is fact or not, or in debate, what we say through understanding the point through perversions, whether if this is that, if that has to be the same way or not, So in this way, there are many ways of understanding through perversions, and also the reasonings, whether if it is a pure reasoning, then it has to be, the reason should be able to apply to any context. So if it is only partially able to apply, then it's not a real reason. So in this way, it really helps you to think more broadly and not make judgments immediately. So it gives you extra strength. So I will just say this, this is a very simple way to understand debate and the effect of it.